Hi, I'm Steve Dissenhoff, and welcome to the other side of the table. Let me explain the title to you. For 40 years, I was part of the hiring process for various companies. The last was as the hiring partner and HR director for an investment firm. During my time, we quintupled the size of the company, and I recruited everyone from front desk receptionists to senior technical positions, and almost half of those people who were eventually became partners of the company. During my time, hiring moved from analog newspaper ads to sophisticated job boards and digital algorithm-based recruiting tools. What I found over that time was, regardless of whether applicants were 22-year-old and looking for the first job, or 42 and should have known how to job hunt, very few applicants really understood the other side of the table. So I created this presentation, which I've been asked to give at colleges, high schools, technical academies. And now that I'm retired, I've wanted to record this presentation and make it available as a help for those of you who are looking for your next job. Let me start with a story. A few years ago, a family friend asked me to help her boyfriend who was applying for jobs and not getting any replies. His cover letter was long, multiple pages, and very generic, not based on any particular company, and pretty much all about him and what he wanted. His objective in the resume was actually for a different job. He had one very relevant experience that the companies he was applying to might be interested in at the very bottom of his resume. And when I asked him why it was buried at the bottom of the resume, his response, which was kind of reflective of his attitude at the time, was, "They're not stupid, they can read." I did a search on the internet for him. And yeah, he was all over social media. His Twitter was full of F-bombs. His Facebook had public pictures of him, pictures of him drinking in public. His picture on his LinkedIn page was actually cropped out of a party photo. His LinkedIn page had misspellings, bad grammar, incomplete paragraphs. And let me tell you, the job he was looking for was as a writer. And his LinkedIn resume was very different from the one that he was actually submitting to companies. So it was no surprise at all that he hadn't landed an interview. Competition is tough. I was on the ferry a while back and saw this poster. And I looked at it and I said, well, gosh, 2%, that can't be right. And I started looking at my own statistics. And what I realized was that the people I actually approached in some way was probably 5 to 10%. But the people who actually came in for interviews was like 2 to 3% of those people who applied for a job. So despite my 10 years as an IT director and my 20 years as an HR director, my expertise really is on the HR side. So how will that help you? That's because this is a typical hiring process. I can't help you with your technical interview. I mean, the specific parts of the job you really need to know and have confidence in. But in the course of this presentation, I'm confident I can help you get to that stage because it usually starts somehow with HR. As you listen to these reflections from my side of the table, I'm going to bet that many of you are going to go, yeah, come on, Steve, that's just common sense. And I'll bet many of you do many of the things that I'm going to talk about today. For some of you, this is going to be a complete revelation. For those of you who do some of these things, just think of this as confirmation that you're on the right track. But I'll tell you, after 20 years of being a hiring partner and 40 years being somehow involved in the hiring process, we're talking about tens of thousands of resumes, hundreds and hundreds of interviews. I'll tell you that only 2 or 3% out of 100 get this right. So it starts with, these days, an AI algorithm that's going to try and find out whether your application matches the requirements for the job. Then it's going to go to HR, which may do that initial screen themselves. If you get by HR, you're going to have interviews, maybe with HR, maybe with the people inside. There may be some testing, background, references, and hopefully down the road, you'll get a job offer. Now, let's get started. I have 2 problems as a hiring manager. First is, Steve, here are the job requirements. We need to fill this position. And in a small company, it might be, hey, you know what? We want somebody exactly like Gail. Just find me another one of her. Or it might be, we don't want to see anybody like Bob. Anything all those characteristics that he has, we don't want to see it. The larger the company, the more HR may be removed from the actual job itself and maybe just working off requirements. So that's the first problem. The second problem is for every job posting that's out there, I get 200 applications. So I've got this vast number of applications that I'm going to try and match up with the job requirements. Those are my two problems. But the first radical concept that seems to surprise some people is this. Hiring managers like me don't care about what you are looking for. No hard feelings, but I don't care about your surfing, your soccer, cycling, all those kinds of things. And most cover letters tend to be kind of all about the applicant, their degree, job, sports, service, hobbies. And I'm just not interested. It's not till you get a few more steps down the road that I start getting interested, and then I get really interested. So what I'm looking for is you show me how you can solve my problem. And one of the things that you should recognize is a job title is not the job. We tend to stick job titles onto things, and they tend to be fairly generic. You need to read about what this job actually is, because that's going to help guide you in your search. And there are lots of resources out there for you to look at. The company website, that's a great place to start. Google, Yelp, Craigslist, networking. Do you know people within the firm? If you do an informational interview, you can be calling. I've hired people out off informational interviews when they struck me as a superstar. You can go to LinkedIn, look for other people in the company and what their jobs are all about and who they are. And then places like, oh gosh, let's not forget the job ad itself. The job ad is going to tell you what they're looking for, and it's going to give you some of the keywords that will help you figure out what you're going to put in your cover letter and your resume. They're going to help me connect the dots between you and the job. And then you go to places like Glassdoor. So this is a typical posting on Glassdoor. They tell you about the job. They tell you what they're looking for. And if you're lucky, many of these jobs have people who've actually interviewed for the jobs that post and tell you what questions they're going to ask. Can you imagine having a test where you know the questions and you're able to prepare the answers in advance? Do your research. It's all there for you. But let's take a step back. The first thing you need to look at is your brand. I want you to think about your brand. And I also want you to recognize, you've heard this before, you only have one chance to make a first impression. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Blink, talked about a Harvard study. And the Harvard study he cited, they gave students who sat through a professor's entire semester a personality profile to fill out a survey about that professor, and they did. And then they showed another group of students a 1-minute video of that professor, and they gave them the same psychological survey, and lo and behold, the results from the 1-minute video and the people who sat through his entire semester were almost identical. And then they went further. They cut it down to a 15-second video that they showed to another group of students. They gave them the same psychological profile, and hey, the correlation was over 90%. Then they went even further. They showed that same group of students a 5-second video and a 2-second video, and the correlation was still around 90%. So first impressions matter. But you have many chances to make that first impression. You have it to the HR people, you have it through your resume and your cover letter, you have it through your voicemail, you have it through your meeting with the person at the reception desk, you have it with the people that you're going to interview with, and they're all important. So email, you can get a generic email through Google or Yahoo or many other places. Use one that is professional. These are all emails that I actually received from people submitting their resumes to me, and invariably they ended up in the circular file because I'm questioning their judgment right away. Next, voicemail. From the time you start looking for a job, your voicemail should be professional. I don't need to explain what that means. You need to have a professional, simple voicemail message. And from the time you start looking, when you answer the phone, always answer professionally. Again, I don't need to go into what that means. But if you've got a voicemail that's humorous that you're using for friends, change it now. Then put together an elevator speech. Now, many of you actually understand what an elevator speech is. In 30 to 60 seconds, you should be able to tell an employer effectively why you are the best person for this job, not only in terms of skill, but why you want to work there. This may be something that you are giving over the first telephone contact, over Zoom contact, or when you sit down and they ask you why you're here for this interview. Practice this, practice, practice, practice. Get it to where you can deliver this confidently and effectively without a lot of ums and uhs and other distractions. This is your chance to make that impression. And then, gosh, take another step back. Go to a search engine and pop your name in there. And what you're going to find invariably these days is that you're all over the internet. Your social media accounts. This is a two-way street. You're looking, first of all, you can find out things about the company, but they can also find out things about you. So if you've got anything up there, lock down all these accounts. And gosh, if you can find things that you would be embarrassed about, take them down. And for some of you, it may be too late. You've heard of the Internet Archive. This is based in San Francisco, called the Wayback Machine. This is a bot that goes and captures web pages randomly and stores them. And when you do a search, they will still pop up. So if there's something out there that you might be embarrassed about, that you don't want your future mother-in-law or father-in-law or employer to see, take it down, lock it down, lock down your social media accounts. Go to Facebook, go to Instagram, go to Blue Sky, remove anything that you think shouldn't be there, and lock it down so only friends can see it. And I'll tell you an example. Years ago, pre-Google, when Yahoo was the search engine of choice, and before Facebook, when MySpace was the social media of choice, I did a search for a candidate. And what I found was the very first thing that popped up was a picture of him in a dorm room. And behind him, he's playing the guitar. Behind him in the dorm room was a whole line of empty whiskey and vodka bottles. If that wasn't bad enough, the only thing he was wearing was the guitar. That was the first thing that popped up when I did a search for him. He's probably still wondering why he didn't get a job interview. Companies look for employees in two ways. One is active. We post online, we do job ads, job boards, career sites. Sometimes we do campus recruiting. We're actually out there looking, trolling for people to apply. And secondly, there are passive ways. Employee referrals. We let our employees know that we're looking for somebody. And I'll tell you, if an employee who knows our culture and knows the person at the other end refers somebody, they move to the head of the line, and I'm really interested in them right up front. We go to recruiters. And recruiters is a tough thing. So they've got a bunch of people who are looking for jobs who come to them. And usually invariably, the very first time that I put out a job with a recruiter, they will give me people that are just not what I'm looking for. And it takes a while for the good recruiters to figure out, here's why I'm rejecting people, and start sending me only people I would be interested in. And finally, there are passive ways like LinkedIn Recruiter. This is LinkedIn Recruiter. If you've got if you have your resume up on LinkedIn, what LinkedIn does is when we post job requirements, it goes and looks through the millions of people who have profiles on LinkedIn, whether or not they're looking for a job, and refers them to us. And we can reach out to them through LinkedIn to see whether they would be interested. And there are people out there who are not necessarily actively looking for a job, but would not be averse to a job offer if they get one. So this is a way. So you want to make sure your LinkedIn profile is good, matches the resumes you're sending out, tells good things about you, makes a good first impression. Cover letters and resumes. So when we are looking for a job, oftentimes we are giving instructions for people of how to find a job. And let me tell you, once again, if there's a single message I want to reiterate for you to take away, it's this. When it comes to hiring, it's not about you. It's all about what the company needs. Can you help me solve my problem? So if there are directions for how to apply for a job, follow those directions. If I get 200 applications and 3 of them or 5 of them or 10 of them aren't following the directions that I have given them, hopefully clearly, I don't even consider them. So again, it's not about you, it's about the job. Cover letters. Put your research to work. You've gone out there, you've looked at the company, you've looked at the job, you understand what they're looking for. Put those in your resume, put those in your cover letter. And here's the thing. Years ago, when I was hiring, I would spend 10 to 15 seconds per resume or cover letter. Sometimes it was a resume, sometimes a cover letter, depends on how I woke up that morning. These days, statistically, as of 2024, the average hiring manager spends 7.1 seconds per applicant. So in the newspaper business, they say, don't bury the lead. In other words, get the most important information that helps connect the dots at the very top. Keywords. You got these from the job ad. You got these from Glassdoor. You got these from LinkedIn. Drop those keywords in your cover letter, in your resume. So whether it's an AI algorithm or an HR manager looking at your at your material, it's right there and pops out for them. It connects the dots. Spell it right. There's nothing worse than misspelling or bad grammar in a resume or a cover letter. I worked for an investment firm. I was a partner. And we were putting millions of dollars of client money and investing it. And a lot of our clients understood what we were doing, and a lot of our clients trusted us. They didn't understand our process. But if we sent them a letter that was misspelled and had bad grammar, that they understood, and then they start questioning everything. So if I'm going to put you in front of my clients, I want you to be able to understand and speak and write your mother tongue. If you have names that you've pulled from this, drop them. I was never more thrilled when people had not only researched the company, but knew about me and knew about some of my work. I worked for a girls' high school in Kenya, and you'd say, "Gee, I saw your work for Daraja Academy, and da da da." That gets my attention. So if you have names, drop them. These are not typical. These are misspellings that actually came in cover letters that I had. These are all fails. These days, we rely on Siri. We rely on autocorrect. We know that Siri makes mistakes. So proof your cover letter, proof your resume, give it to somebody else to look at, sleep on it, come back on it. Make sure that everything is correct. Typical cover letter, it's personalized. The person has connected the dots for me, and they left contact information and a good close, very professional. For your resume, we know that there are both functional resumes and chronological resumes. If you've got a work history that goes from job to job and shows growth, great. Chronological is fine. That's kind of the typical one. If you've got gaps in your resume, or it's for a technical position where you really want to highlight the technical achievements you have, functional resume, go for it. Tech resume should list technical skills. Again, drop your keywords in there. Get them, all those things that connect the dots for me. Achievements. I don't want to hear about roles that you had. I want to hear about things you accomplished in those roles. Putting a summary in is great. Putting a job objective, I would highly recommend you don't put that in your resume. The reason is, if the job objective you have doesn't exactly match the job that I'm offering, I'm going to rule you out. So don't take the risk of me ruling you out. If you have a specific job objective, you want to drop that in your cover letter, that's fine, as long as you make sure that it's for that company. Tell the truth. I have pulled job offers from people who did not tell me the truth that I found out later. People who said for jobs that they didn't need a college degree for, but when they told me they had a college degree and I found out they didn't, pulled the job. Tell the truth. Only put in appealing hobbies or activities only. If it's not relevant, not of interest, a bunch of years ago, somebody applied for a job and her activities were juggling and darts. Now, once upon a time back when I was in grad school, was a competitive dart player. So, hey, The fact that darts, which is a kind of a non-standard activity, got my attention. And of course, the first thing I asked her when she came in for an interview was, do you juggle darts? And then finally, make your resume, make your cover letter look good. Recognize that optical character recognition programs choke on things like boxes and stars. So I would resist anything that you have to put an icon in that's non-standard, because the optical character recognition program isn't going to know what to do about it. We use applicant tracking systems. So we are very digital these days. We not only are we using things like LinkedIn Recruiter, but we flow that into an applicant tracking system. And these applicant tracking systems actually will put out reference checks. They will send out letters to the people you give us as references. We'll track when they come in. We'll synthesize them for us. So just so you know, these things are happening in the background. And again, when you're putting all this together, stay on message. This was an actual paragraph that somebody included in a position for a mutual fund operations position. As you can recognize, I saw this person, gosh, they're pretty smart. They've done some interesting things. Has nothing to do whatsoever with a mutual fund accounting position. Mistakes you can make: long descriptions of character, short descriptions of accomplishments. Lists of roles without noting achievements. Highlight your achievements. An erratic employment record. I'm going to ask you and if it's not apparent, your cover letter should talk about why you had an erratic employment record. And I'll tell you, I was a poster child for this. I was a clinical social worker with a master's in social work for almost 2 decades. Then I stayed home for a bunch of years raising my kids because my wife had a job that made more money than I did. Got an MBA while I was home with the kids, went back to school, became a partner in an investment management firm. So I had a very obvious employment gap in my employment record that I needed to explain, but it had a good explanation to it. Duplicative job titles. Don't make a job title sound more than it is. We will find out. If your job title makes you seem like you're the CEO of the company and really you were just the front desk manager, we're going to find that out somewhere along the way. Again, it's telling the truth. And then again, tangential non-achievements. If you've got an achievement, it should mean something. It should be something that you can defend. Here are resumes. This person put their summary of the qualifications. Again, not a job objective. Listed their qualifications, their accomplishments. Here's a technical resume. Their certifications at the top, their accomplishments midway, their technical skills at the bottom. Functional resume. And then recognize that all correspondence from beginning of the process to the end of the process matters. This is somebody who's actually fairly far down the process, and she decided to send a text message to me that looked like one that she would send to her friends. And I read this and I said, what is the judgment to send this? So treat all correspondence and contacts as formal and as another opportunity to make an impression. If you get through this initial process, and you're one of those 2% that get called in for an interview, used to be interviews were face-to-face. These days, they tend to be on Zoom. They tend to be virtual. In the last few years, your first interview is likely to be remote. I started doing remote interviews around 2010. I found them very helpful for me because I could cut it off after 5 minutes or I could make it an hour. One of the things that I found was, and I recommend to you, first of all, find good, reliable bandwidth, a place where you're not going to get drops. Find a quiet setting with no background distractions. I've had people who tried to do a job interview from a busy Starbucks, and I'll tell you, they didn't go well. Good lighting that makes you look good. In this case, I've got 2 LED lights in front of me that make me look good. I don't have a window behind me that throws me completely in shadow. There are programs these days where you can change the white balance and adjust your color temperature to make you look good. For any interview, dress appropriately. Dress up. Dress a little nicer than you normally would, even nicer than people at the company that you're looking for. And then make eye contact. Um, Decide where you're going to put your camera. In my case, when I've got a Zoom window open, I take the Zoom window, I put it up next to the camera. So I'm pretty much looking at the camera, even though I'm looking at the person that I'm talking to. Be nice to everybody. Be nice to the receptionist. I've had occasions, more than one, where I have sent somebody for a very high position back to meet the people that they're going to be interviewing with, working with. At the end of the interview, I come back to them. I said, "What'd you think?" And they go, "Oh, I think they're pretty good." I said, "Let me tell you how they treated the receptionist. They treated her like dirt. They were obnoxious. They were demanding. And what I was told was, don't bring the person back. Be nice to everyone you meet." My mom used to say people judge you on three things: how you look, how you speak, and what you say, in that order. So look good, speak well, and look, if you're used to F-bombs, I don't care if the other person on the other side of the table is throwing out stuff, leave that gutter language, as my mom used to call it, at home. And then what you say. Be prepared to talk about the position, talk about the company. The content is going to be the third thing they look at. When I'm hiring people, I'm looking at three things. First one, number one, attitude. I want somebody that I want to work with, that wants to be here. Um, Attitude is my number one thing. The second thing is aptitude. No one comes in knowing everything about the position. Everyone needs training. Do they have the aptitude to learn the position? And then the third thing is, what skills and knowledge do they actually have? My wife, who had her own business, told me that things she looked for was she's looking for a team player, that's your attitude, teachable, that's your attitude, someone who's smart, thoughtful, reliable, and yeah, had a sense of humor. Yeah, I was looking for that too. You can go online and Google what are the 10 most asked questions during an interview, and inevitably you're going to get somebody who's going to ask you about your strengths. They're going to ask you about your weaknesses. This is the opportunity beforehand to turn your weaknesses into strengths and talk about them as strengths. Why are you interested in working here? I always ask people to tell me about what they knew about us, because I wanted somebody who had done the research about our company. And I can't tell you the number of people who said, "Oh gosh, I meant to look at your website, but I ran out of time." Immediately, that's a disqualifying red flag for me. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? I tended to want people who wanted some growth, who didn't expect to be in the same job in 10 years. But I also didn't want somebody who's coming in for an entry-level position who said, "I want to be the manager of the department as soon as possible." Why do you want to leave your current company? Perfectly valid question. Here's the thing: don't badmouth your former company. Find ways to talk about it positively. Was there a gap in your employment? Be able to explain that. What are three things your former manager would like you to improve on? And I, during your reference check, will ask your former manager just that. Tell me about an accomplishment you were proud of. And more than ever these days, we're using behavioral interviewing. Tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with another employee. What'd you do about it? How'd you get it resolved? Tell me about a time when you disagreed with something your supervisor asked you to do. What'd you do? Tell me about a time when you had too much work for the time allotted. What did you do? And here, what I'm looking for is your thought process. I want to know how you thought about resolving this and then how you ended up doing it. Mistakes not to make: failing to prepare and coming off as underprepared. Now, I tended to be horrified by the thought of public speaking. I was terrified of it. Early in my career, if you put a camera in my face or I had to talk to a big group, I was almost catatonic. But what I found was the more I prepared, the better I got, to the point where I could talk in front of a group. And yeah, I still get nervous, but I was prepared. Be prepared to talk about your job, why you want to work for the company you're interviewing for, your resume. And Be prepared to ask good questions. I was always bitterly disappointed when I spent an hour with somebody and I turned it around at the end and said, what do you want to ask me? And they went, I really don't have any questions. I want you to ask me questions about this. Don't spout off with too much information. Keep your answers concise, to the point. Take credit for your accomplishments. Don't put anyone down. Don't put your former supervisor, or employer, or employees. Don't put anybody down. Find a way to tactfully frame things in a positive way. Use strong words and phrases. Be able to explain your resume. And when it comes to that question about how much are you making at your former job, resist. Do not answer that question. A good answer is, if I'm offered the position, I trust the compensation will be in the same range that others in a similar position are making. Why? Because the person who answers that question first loses. If you answer that question with, here's what I'm making, that puts a stake in the ground as to where the company should start. Let the company go first with that. Again, the interviews are a two-way street. What made you decide to work here? Life is way too short to be working with people that you don't want to work with. Life's too short to be taking a job with a company that in 2 months you are going to regret taking that job and don't want to work there anymore. So ask the person on the side of the table, what made you decide to work here? What do you like best about working here? What's the culture like? What would a typical day look like for me? How can I best meet your information? And in 6 months, what would success look like? You want to learn about the culture. You want to learn about training. Who does it? How is it done? What is it? What's a day like? Is this a public or private company? And why is this position open? Is there much turnover in this job? Things I've learned to ask over the last couple of years is there a remote work policy? How has that changed over the years? Companies that were letting people work 100% remotely a few years ago now want people back in the office. Is there a hybrid policy? Can you do some companies now that people want people in the office a couple of days a week to build teamwork, to make connections, and then a couple of days a week they let people work remotely. And then since COVID, I know companies have revised their sick leave policies, especially encouraging workers to stay home when they're sick. Even before COVID, we didn't want people sick coming into the office because if they came in sick, everybody else around them got sick. So how has that changed over the last couple of years? At the end of this, send thank you notes. I was thrilled when I got a handwritten note from people. You don't need to do that, although they're really nice. Send a thank you note to everyone you meet. It makes a difference. Even email notes, those are fine. Send it to everyone. References. When companies, first of all, don't offer references up front. When there's going to be a job offer, that's the time when you want to offer references, because you want your references only contacted when people are seriously interested in looking for you. Putting references upon request at the bottom of your resume is just fine. But then talk to your references and find out whether they're comfortable giving you a positive references. And I'm going to give you an example. Years ago, I was hiring somebody for a client-facing position. And when I called the reference that she gave me, who was her former employer, here's what I was told. She's great with our clients. Clients seem to love her. But you know something? I learned never to leave her alone with the cash box. Enough said. Never fail to follow up. Even if you don't get the job, see if you can find out why you didn't get the job. Leave them with a good feeling about you. Don't burn bridges or with employers you've left. Years ago, before my time at my company, they were looking for an office manager. They interviewed a couple of people. They had a couple of strong candidates. They hired one of them. And, in a couple of weeks, it didn't work out. I can't remember why. So they reached out and they contacted the second person, who was actually driving at the time. She ended up working for the company for 10 years. So leave them with a good feeling about you. So finally, let's review. The job, it's all about the company, not about you. Connect the dots. Help me as a hiring manager solve my problem. Do your research. Customize your cover letters, customize your resumes. I can't tell you the number of cover letters I got over the years, and it was not a small amount, who were actually sent to companies before me with the other company's name in it, but they forgot to customize it and revise it for my company. Drop those keywords into it. They're telling you what they're looking for. Tell them why you are the person for the job. Make a great impression with everyone you meet at every stage of the hiring process. And finally, if you're going to spend 40 or 50 or 60 hours working for this company, treat job hunting as your job. Put the same time in to job hunting as you would for working with the company. So I hope in the last few minutes, I've been able to give you something to add to your toolbox for job hunting, things that you will take away or things that will confirm things you're already doing. Again, my name is Steve Dissenhoff, and I wish you the best of luck in your hunt.